Keith going to be here today?
I believe he is in the office. If not, he will be on the phone.
There he is.
Hey, how are you? I'm sitting with Angel and here you walk in.
Be careful.
Well, you can like try and multiply like 1, 2, 3 times 4, 5, 6.
That's what I was doing that, and things like that. It wasn't-
Maybe that's why Jeff's numbers are all.
Okay, good afternoon. It is 1 o'clock. We are scheduled for some more budget hearings today. Keith Johnson's in the room, Commissioner Mullen, myself, our clerk of the board. I believe Commissioner Peck's on the phone. Okay. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order. If everybody would please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with that, we'll start the Human Services. Kyle Sullivan.
And so I know, let me move this so I can talk.
Please,
Kyle.
yes, we prefer you to remove it so we can hear you.
Okay.
Kyle, can I just interject, and this is really for all of the speakers. Yesterday, we found that it's difficult to pick up the recording and for the phone to hear. If we're not speaking pretty loudly in the microphone, or if you can hear yourself over on the overhead, we're probably okay, but we want
Okay.
to make sure that everybody that needs to hear can. So
All
thank you.
right, I'll try and speak loud. And I know, and I don't know, from the, there were, my budget last year had a lot of COVID dollars added to it. I don't know if the board would like me just to give a brief overview of that funding, even though that's not on, those aren't items that we need, that are for us to present today. But I do have dollar amounts, and I can just very briefly let you know kind of the funding that we
I would
have received.
prefer that. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Would you like me to start with that then?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, if you wouldn't mind.
And so we begin receiving funding, probably a year and a half ago in response to COVID. The initial dollars that we received, there were, we just called it the Commerce COVID. And it was, we had for both, it was, and a lot of our funding has been combined, Benton and Franklin County dollars just to serve our community. And so we did receive a total of $707,000 originally. That was the first wave. That was Benton and Franklin County dollars that we were asked to develop an isolation and quarantine site for people that were either displaced because they had tested positive or needed or were homeless. Or it just impacted. And so we had gone into contract with one of our local hotels and blocked out funding that was time limited. And so we'd spent all the funding on, we saw it in waves. There was, I think, 1 month where we only had a couple of people. There was 1 month when there was an outbreak at the Mission that we had filled. We had blocked out 25 beds and that we were full, and we actually had to account for additional beds at a different facility. So we received CDBG, which is Community Development Block Grant funding. That's for the non-entitlement areas of the county. And Franklin County's portion of that was $23,000. And it was, again, COVID response to help with rental assistance, utilities, deposits, those kinds of things. And the CDBG funding we contract through Community Action Connections, and so all of our CDBG funding that we've received, we contract out there. They've got a presence out in the smaller cities within the county. We had our original it's called ERAP. It's Eviction Rental Assistance Program. Our original dollars that we received that we completely expended. The first three that the first two that I talked about, and then this one, the funding it's got end dates on it, but we had expended all of the funding. Franklin County's portion of that was just under 1.4 million. And that was for rental assistance, people that had been impacted by COVID, that had maybe in that first wave lost their jobs after things shut down. Maybe they didn't lose their job, but they weren't being paid. The restaurant industry took a hit, those kinds of things. And so that funding, quite frankly, we were able to expend that pretty quick and easily. There wasn't a lot of reporting requirements that now we're starting to see now. And so we received ESG COVID dollars. ESG is Emergency Solutions Grant. Focus on that is for our people that are homeless, trying to get them off the street. And so we've used those dollars to help stop the spread, put people in hotels, those kinds of things. Find housing. Franklin County's portion of that was $1.1 million. That contract we're in the process of expending those funding. That contract expires in June of 22. So we had rental assistance dollars that were part of the federal government's initial $25 billion response. Washington State received 500 and change, in the 500 millions.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right.
Should have this on silent.
And so again, Franklin County's portion of that is $5.6 million. Currently, that funding expires at the end of the year, although we're in the process of getting that extended out. And I know that will be extended out. That hasn't happened yet. I anticipate we'll be dealing with that probably sometime in December. And that's for, again, a lot of these dollars are just rental assistance, help with, we do have the ability, I know Keith and I have had conversations because we have the ability to help pay utilities with that funding also. I've reached out to the PUD, to the city of Pasco, City of Connell, make sure that they understand that if they've got delinquent utility bills, they've got residents that are in need of the services, to send them my way. And I've made access to giving them access to a digital copy of our application. We had we're really used to having to report on everything. And so Treasury's made it, although, they originally made it, try to make it easy, and tell us, well, you don't have, there's a lot of the normal reporting requirements that weren't there. Although what we're finding now, and has been a bit of a burden, is that they're coming seems like every month or every other month, they come back and say, okay, well, yeah, we need you to report on this also. And it would be one thing if it was from this date forward, but they're requiring us to go back to the beginning of the funding and kind of recreate the wheel. And so it's been pretty labor intensive, and we spent a lot of time trying to go back and pull files and come up with data. Again, that's so I think I don't know if I told you, that was about $5.6 million. We're in the process of trying to spend that. I believe that will be extended out until is that 24?
Yes.
Okay. We got another community development block grant, COVID-1 and COVID-2. Franklin County's portion of that's about $154,000. Again, we have that funding contracted with Community Action Connections, and it's rental and utility assistance. Just again, they send somebody out so that the people from the smaller cities, the Connell, Mesa, Colotus, they don't have to come into the Tri-Cities to get assistance. They've got a presence out there that can fill out help them with the application process and do all of that. We also received Treasury Rental Assistance 2.0, and we just got that. That's an additional $5.8 million. Again, a lot of funding. And so that's one of the things you'll see in some of our other funds. We haven't spent as much of our Veterans Relief Fund, of our Affordable Housing Fund. If we can help them, if it was historically something that we would have used our local money for, but if they qualify, if the need and they qualify for this program, we'll spend this money first and keep the local dollars for when, for down the road. We're not going to lose that at the end of the contractual period, if you will, like we would with this funding. And so that's the funding that I have to date. My understanding is that, and I'm fairly certain that we're going to be getting an additional award of, it's again, all these acronyms. It's another ERAP. It's another Emergency Rental Assistance Program funding. Franklin County's portion of that, I believe, will be around $4 million. I haven't got that yet. That'll likely come sometime next year, and I'll certainly shoot you all an email and let you know when that funding comes in.
So the grand total, just FYI, grand total before that 4 million that Kyle just mentioned is
14.
14 million.
It's about almost just under 14.4.
For both counties?
No,
For
for Franklin
Franklin?
County.
Just Franklin County portion. Yeah.
It's a lot of funding.
Can I ask you a quick question on the utility assistance?
Yes.
Is that limited to electricity, water, or does it include things like residential garbage service?
I believe garbage is included in it.
The ones that are renting that.
Yeah, that's the only hang up. This is I believe the city's received funding for assistance for people to mortgage. This is specific. One of the qualifying factors is you have to be renting. And so I've had conversations with the utility district, with the cities, that if they've got funding, it would be helpful for them to focus their funding, if it's allowable, on people to mortgage. And we still have a lot of funding available. And so if there isn't any reason why anybody's utilities at this point should be turned off because of non-payment, because we can assist with that.
Yeah, TRAP 2 can go back 18 months to pay. So
It can go back to the beginning of
COVID.
March of what, 20?
In case somebody slipped through the crack and.
Yep. Well,
So-
they had the the governor's, and part of the governor's proclamation was that there couldn't be shutoffs. There couldn't be, I've worked with the Superior Court, with the Dispute Resolution Center, with Legal Aid, Northwest Justice. We had to develop a program as part of the Bridge Proclamation to address, before evictions now the utility shutoff is a separate issue. It's not tied to this program, but it's to address the evictions before they get to court. And again, I went back to Superior Court. Judge Shea Brown was kind of in charge of that. Had conversations with them, with the Dispute Resolution Center. At this point, landlords can evict because of maybe bad behavior or whatever other reasons that they can evict for. I have enough funding right now that there should not be an eviction because of non-payment of rent. And so that's part of the process. If an eviction happens, the Legal Aid or Northwest Justice will refer to the Dispute Resolution Center or to my office. And then Dispute Resolution Center, if there's issues with the landlord or the tenant not signing the forms, the necessary paperwork, then they work with my office and we make sure to get that all coordinated so that it doesn't end up so we don't have a flood of these, in the legal system.
So the standing eviction order or moratorium that had been in place, that is no longer there. Is that correct?
There was the Bridge Proclamation, and part of the requirement for the Bridge Proclamation is that one is that there's a functional rental assistance program, which I had to attest to when I put on our website, and I'd had conversations with Legal Aid. The second part of that is that Dispute Resolution Center had essentially a functional the capacity to be able to meet the community's needs. And I know they had originally struggled with some hiring problems, but since that, they're up to speed. They've completed that. They have a functional resolution program, and so now, if a landlord can evict essentially if they follow the process and again though we're not in a situation where non-payment of rent, which is normally there's a lot of things that would have to happen before a landlord could evict because of non-payment of rent. And again, because primarily that's something I can
Help
cover.
with. Yeah. Thank you.
And you're saying besides that 14 million we've already received, we're going to get another 4.
Yeah.
Approximately, that's a round number. We don't have an exact number yet. My understanding though is that they're in the process. There are some counties that have had some difficulty expanding the funding, and so they're deobligating that funding, and then we'll redistribute it to the counties that have been able to spend the funding. What we've been told is that that's approximately what we'll be receiving, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but that's a ballpark
And
figure.
that would take you into 2024, June of 2024.
And you'll be able to, you can assist veterans with this money too, correct?
Yes, and we have, and again, like I said, there have been veterans that historically we maybe would have helped with the relief fund, but if they come in, they qualify for the rental assistance. We'd rather use the rental assistance than the money that stays locally with us.
And they're thrilled about that because not only do we pay it back, but we can pay ahead. And so, yeah, we've been making people quite happy that not only got that relief of not being evicted, but then they can get relief by paying it and paid ahead for them too.
3 months.
Yeah,
3 months ahead.
yeah.
With the rent, we can't do that with
So,
utilities.
yeah, sorry, just right.
And that assistant goes directly to either the landlord or
Yes.
the utility company?
Yes.
Yes.
And how do the tenants know about this?
We have to communicate, and we have to get signatures from both the tenant and, or is that what you're asking? How they know?
Well,
that the
I
payment was
know
made, or
in-
how do they find out about it?
Well, like a situation, as a landlord, we didn't even attempt to evict anybody because the governor came out and said, you can't.
Yeah.
And so then you can get a rental or a renter that racks up $10,000 or $12,000 and they just move out. Well, they don't even attempt to get rental assistance because one, they don't want any contact with the landlord. So my question is, how do the tenants find out about different programs?
And part of the funding, we've contracted we had to contract a certain percentage, I think it was 5%.
Yeah.
To an identified by and for. So an agency that's run by the population that they serve. The only identified by and for agency, and there may be more, but the only one that Commerce had identified was the Tri-City Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And so part of that is part of what the dollars we contracted them for is outreach and education. The reality is that there are people that we're missing. But we've gone on, I've had meetings with all the cities. I've had meetings with the utility companies. We've asked and provided them with applications with our applications. I had one of the meetings I met with, and I'm sorry, I can't recall the association, but we've tried to meet with associations that represent landlords, provide them with the information, request that they send it out to I think the big companies, obviously, I think that we're hitting. I think the reality is that there's probably some private individual landlords that
We're unaware.
yeah, they're unaware, and I think we're trying to make an effort to educate the community, but we can do what we can do. And
All right, thank you.
so my suggestion is, if you have a tenant that
Yeah, I had
is
tenants.
delinquent on their bill, send them my way. I can help.
Yeah, the problem is they're not in Franklin County, and so.
Well, okay, if they're in a different county, though, all the counties in the state have
Yes.
the same programs.
Right.
So I would encourage whoever to reach out to the county that they reside in.
Thank you.
So
So any other questions about the COVID funding? I know I want to be respectful of the people that are behind us and make sure we can comment on the stuff that you.
We'll go through the
scheduled me
budget.
to comment on.
Yep.
Okay, and so I think to start off with, we have Fund 186, the Affordable Housing for All. That's also referred to as we refer to it in my office as 1406. It was the House bill that allowed us to retain a certain percentage of the local sales tax and use it locally. This fund we've not spent anything on yet. We're treating this fund similar to our 2060 fund, our affordable housing fund. We have a steering committee, and I think we have a steering committee scheduled meeting for November 1st. And so, our hope with this funding is to treat it similar to our 2060. We struggle with access to affordable housing in our community. And so this fund, along with our 2060 fund, will go toward capital projects. So what will end up happening is we'll get together. Keith is the Franklin County's representative on the steering committees. We'll have our meeting November 1st to talk about both this fund and one of the funds I'll talk about in a minute. How much, Tammy will give a report as to, how much funding we have available, what we want to send out an RFP for. And then we've got private people, private landlords, private developers that have an interest in developing affordable housing. This is essentially grant funding. Depending on the dollar amount, we would, there's a 5, 10, or 15-year restricted covenant that we would place on the property to make sure that it's used for the intended purpose. So what ends up happening is we'll give, we'll post an RF, well, probably an RFA, funding available, and request proposals. We'll advertise in the paper. We'll probably put it on the county's website, on the city's website, seeking applications for projects. And so then the applicants will present to the steering committee, and the steering committee will kind of score them, decide, what we get the most bang for our buck on, which projects we want to help, and then provide a recommendation. And I bring that recommendation to the board to ask for approval with an explanation of the projects and ask for approval and entering into a contract so that we can fund that project. An example of a project that that the steering committee hit, it wasn't 1406, it was the 2060, but again, similar fund balance, similar program was the Pasco Haven, where Catholic Charity is developing a 54 unit affordable housing, supported housing project for our local residents that have a behavioral health disorder and have been homeless or are needing a little bit more support. So county put in $146,000, I think, for land acquisition. And that's a project that'll probably be completed moving forward. That's a similar use of what this fund is. And so that's my long-winded explanation. If you need to cut me short, please feel free to cut me short. My staff always give me a hard time that I just kind of start talking and then I don't stop.
For this year, we received $51,550. So the balance is projected to be $66,220. And like Kyle says, we haven't used the funds yet. That will be meeting with the committee on November 1st, and they can decide if they just want to have it grow or if they want to use it for some capital project, and then we'll go out for bid for that. Do you guys have any questions on that one? Okay. We'll jump to the next one. Right? Yep. Sorry. Veterans.
Okay, so the next fund is Fund 187, and I think I might be going.
No, you're right.
All right, 187. That's our Veterans Relief Fund. Like I said, there have been veterans that we have served with other funding source, with state or federal funding sources that historically or typically we would serve them with this fund. And so, so I think that, as long as we've got the state fund funds coming in, we'll probably continue to do that. Again, at the end of the day, if we don't spend the state and federal money, we got to give it back. So we'd rather spend that in our community and retain our local funding that we can use at a later date. So this last year, we'd gone through a complete board change, except for one individual remained from the previous board. COVID, I think, we had some meetings, some virtual meetings, but we'd gone over the previous board's service. I think it's a 2-year service request. And so we'd asked if there were any of the previous board that wanted to continue to serve, and I think they'd done their time and done a good job, and we're ready to hand it off to the next group. And so we've got a new group. I think our board is very energetic. We've had a couple of meetings, and I know there are some things we've already had conversations about. Maybe some policy, some changes we could make in the policy regarding uses of the fund. Some of that, I've had conversations with Jen Johnson, the PA's office, about that. There are a couple of hiccups with some of that, but if we make any recommended changes to the policy, we'll bring it before the board and have a discussion about that and the reason behind that. And so that's probably something that I believe I'll be coming before you guys early in 22 to talk about some of those issues.
Kyle, I got a quick question about the use of Veterans Assistance Funds. As you're well aware, we operate or house that Veterans Assistance Center here in Pasco. That facility is used exclusively for Veterans Assistance programs. And right now, the parking lot of that facility needs some pretty significant resurfacing. Could Veterans Assistance Funds be used as a capital investment to improve the quality of that facility so that people in wheelchairs or otherwise might be difficult getting from their cars to the building have easier access, or are those funds restricted where they can't be used for capital improvements?
Yeah, that's not a fund that can be used for capital purposes. This is primarily for indigent vets and making sure that if they're having issues with, again, typical expenses that we would see are maybe food expenses if they can't make ends meet and they need some assistance with food. We typically will assist with rent. Again, we have other funds at this point that we've been using and not spending that fund for those kinds of things. But
We can use the 2060 though, that'd be an excellent project.
well, yeah, except it's not housing, it's not affordable housing. So that and that there may be some other fund sources that we can certainly delve into and take a look and see. But the relief fund wouldn't be an allowable
I
expense.
kind of assumed that, but
Yeah.
I wanted to run that idea by you. Thank you.
You want to talk about that?
Okay, so, let's see. So we're projecting that, sorry, can you guys hear me? We're projecting that we'll get 124,900 in revenue. Our balance is 435,910. So with that is 560,810. Like Kyle says, that for our expenses, we have like food, rent, gas, utilities, burial, dental, childcare. And so we're projecting those as listed on the spreadsheet that you can see now up there. But like I said, we haven't used that much this year because we've been using federal funds and they get more, if you will, bang for their buck by using the federal funds. And this money's not going to go anywhere, so we can use it for other projects down the road. Do you guys have any questions?
Now, with this fund, if I remember the right terminology, once it gets up so high, then we can look, we're gonna look at the taxation adjustment.
There's not a requirement to, but there certainly is an option. And I think before the board looked at that, I know, I know one of the requests that the advisory board has had is looking at the option of bringing a veteran service officer, county-funded veteran service officer, and salary could be paid out of this fund. We're still trying to iron out some of those wrinkles, and I know the WDVA came in just prior to COVID and did a presentation to my staff on that and about the benefits of and the revenue that a service officer can bring to these vets to, and can bring to the county, and kind of reduce some of their burden on other social services. And so I think before the board had a discussion about that, I would like to at least be able to bring that to the board, to describe what their recommendation is, see if that's something that would be of interest. And I think that, again, that's something that can be paid for out of this fund. I don't have a dollar amount as to what the fund gets to before the county can look at or looks at reducing that. I think one thing I do know is I believe that the county there are certainly higher levels that the county could tax at. Obviously, right now that's not needed.
Right.
But
We're at the lowest taxable
right,
rate,
Yeah.
right,
and I believe it was 3 years, if I remember it right.
okay,
3 years accumulated. And I think we're well over that but we understand why we're using the federal funds.
right.
Okay. All right.
Kyle, I have one last question. On the burial services, is there a dollar limit and can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, is it 2,000?
It's
It's $2,000.
Okay. Do you think that's adequate? Most funerals, burial services generally run in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. So is 2,000 adequate, or is that a limit set by statute, or could the locals?
I believe that's something that it's a limit that's identified in our policy. Now, mind you, the policy, that limit hasn't changed since I've been doing this. And so
Yeah.
that's a good point to bring up. And that's,
We looked into that, because I mentioned it before, that seems super low, but I thought we looked into it and there was some kind of.
I'd have to get back with you. And what I can do is I can look at statute.
There are some other federal, maybe state funds available for burial services related to COVID
Yeah,
that I keep hearing about, and I don't know that we've taken advantage of, and I don't know if that could be used in combination with the veteran service. But like I said, I think 2,000 would be helpful for anyone,
right,
but that's pretty basic.
Off the top of my head, I know the statute is vague, because they want local jurisdictions to be able to identify what their vets, what a vet needs in Franklin County is not always the same as what a vet needs in King County. And so they want that flexibility. But that's something that I'll look into and see if there is a cap in statute listed on that. I'll be honest with you, I can't recall how that number became that number. All right, we ready to move on to the next one? Next one's Fund 188, Ending Homelessness Fund. This is our homeless housing fund. It's part of the document recording fee. So every document that's recorded in the county, fund is split into, well, not split. There's a portion of the fund that goes to the state, of course, as always. And there's part of the fund goes into our affordable housing fund, and part of it goes into the homeless housing fund. And so you might hear this fund also called 2163. This fund is directed more at programs and trying to fill gaps in our housing system. And so an example of that is I came before the board a couple of years ago. It was before COVID. After I'd had discussions with both DCYF, with Child Protective Services, and with My Friend's Place, which is a youth shelter. And problem that was identified is you have these kids that are at 18, when they on their 18th birthday, the homeless shelter is licensed as a youth facility. So on their 18th birthday, whether they're a senior in high school and doing all the right things, on their 18th birthday, they're out of the facility. Same thing with foster care. On their 18th birthday, they're out now. They can sign back in, but oftentimes kids that are 18 think they know what's best and they want to go out and try it on their own. And so it just creates difficulty for them in succeeding. So we felt like a gap in our system was that young adult. There's a big kind of emphasis at the state level too to address youth and young adult homelessness. So that was a program that we developed with this fund. And so I think we have a list of the programs up there. We have a mental health housing program, a jail release program, disabled housing. Emergency housing gives us the option of using this funding for a deposit and rental assistance, first month's rent, those kinds of things. There's our young adult housing program, and we have a low barrier housing program. That was a requirement from the state that we use local funding for something for a low barrier project. And so I'll let Tammy talk about the fund part.
So, that's okay. So the revenues that were generated for this year is 702,385. And like Kyle mentioned, we have jail, substance abuse, disabled, mental health. Again, these numbers are growing a little bit higher than what we usually use because we use this 2163 a lot. But again, we've been using our federal and state funds. So this has grown more than what you'll see in the past. So once we don't have those federal funds, then we'll start using more of the local dollars. But we're just going to use this one.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
That's right.
usually the general rule of thumb that we try to do is keep a year's what we would accrue in a year in our fund, kind of as a reserve, if you will. Typically we spend in these programs, we spend everything that we bring in. Again, the last year and a half have been a little bit weird because of COVID, and the level of funding that we receive from the state and feds is kind of unprecedented. So we try to use that money first, and we know that we'll be able to spend the local funding when the day comes that we don't have some of this other money. You guys have any questions about this? Okay. All right. I think I got one more.
Yep.
And so this is the Affordable Housing Fund. You might also hear it termed 2060. Again, kind of like the first fund that we talked about with the 1406. This is a capital fund. This is part of the document recording fee. And again, like I said earlier, we have this is governed by or directed by a steering committee. Steering committee listens to proposals, recommends how much of the fund to release. They hear the proposals, make a recommendation that I bring to the board, describe the program, request permission to enter into contract to help fund that. Again, like I said, in depending on dollar amount, we tie a restrictive covenant to the program of the property in 5, 10, or 15-year increment, depending on how much money they receive. And again, like I said, the steering committee will meet for our initial time, November 1st. This is something we typically do once a year. And there are years that if the previous year we'd spent a lot, maybe the steering committee will recommend just letting the fund grow in the hopes that they can support a larger project maybe the following year. So if if the steering committee is recommending expending funds, then my hope would be to come before you sometime in January with recommended projects to fund. If not, then we'd be having this conversation next year. I'll let Tammy talk about the money part of it.
Excuse me. So the revenue we're projected is 116,000. Currently, right now, we have 620,000. So that gives us a grand total of 768,06. And like Kyle said, it depends on November 1 if they decide to go out for RFA, is what you call it, to see if they want to
Sorry, no.
NOFA.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. A NOFA, or if they want to have it grow, but we'll know more when it comes to November 1st and get with the committee to see what we're going to do. But that's up to the committee, and then we bring it back to you guys, how that is spent.
Okay.
Okay, so any questions?
Have you already sent out notices for projects to be proposed on that?
No, we have I think we have a meeting November 1st, a Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Scheduled. I hope you got the invite. You should. If not,
I'm sure I did.
let me know and I'll
Yeah.
make sure and get it to you. And so I think that's when we'll talk about, get input from the steering committee on if we want to release funding, if we do, how much. And then once that decision's made, that's when we'd send out the NOFA. And my hope would be that we'd have that decided, have a NOFA open for about a month. And then hopefully like early December, be able to listen to proposals and then go into contract sometime mid to end of January. Again, after, I'd hope to come, maybe not that first week, but the second week before the board and describe the recommended projects and request authorization to enter in the contract. Go from there and then do some good things.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we've got Superior Court. Tiffany? If we could get you all to be able to speak into the mic so we can hear, because we're not getting it recorded well.
Take this off so it's not muffled.
Okay.
I'm Tiffany, this is Marshall, our adult drug court coordinator, and this is Judge Mitchell. We're here to present the Superior Court budget for 2022. We don't have a lot of requests. We are requesting our standard COLA, if that's what the Fed County gives out in COLA. We just always request to be considered for that as well. Our adult drug court remains at 70 participants. Craig County's portion is 20, so their percentage rates have not changed for 2022. Included the standard IP assessments and salary costs, administrative fees for our bi-counties. The new requests that we are requesting this year just include costs for increases to services. One being our IS department services that they anticipate for 2022, which is an increase of $1,000 for the year. The biggest request would be out of my professional line item. We, my AOC interpreter reimbursement agreement nearly doubled this year. In the past, our annual interagency agreement had always been around $30,000 and it increased to $62,000 this last year, and they have already told me for 2022 it'll be the same amount. We also were successful in getting an interagency agreement through the AOC for the UGA cost, which was, it started out at the beginning of the year as an unfunded mandate. So they gave us $66,409 towards those costs, which is the court has to appoint attorneys and court visitors for these cases. They're minor guardianship cases. It was a cost to us that we hadn't had before 2021. So we were lucky to get some funding for that. And then lastly, we are requesting to get a copy machine contract, which would be maintained through our IS. I've already talked to Liz. We have come to the point where we realize we need a copy machine for our jury trials to copy off questionnaires. We used to use the clerk's office, but they are just becoming so busy. It really disrupts the flow of their business when we go in there and try to copy off. You know, if you have 80 jurors, maybe 5 sets of it, it just takes a lot of time. So after talking, we decided it's probably time that we're busy enough to just get a copy machine for jury trials. So those are my only requests for 2022.
Questions?
I think you used the acronym UGA.
Uniform Guardianship Act.
Okay, I only want to make that clarification because the UGA has a term of art in the planning and building area,
Oh,
or growth area, urban growth area, and I just want to make sure that there's no confusion in the record. So thank you.
okay, yeah, that is it's a new one for us this year too, the Uniform Guardianship Act. So, yeah.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Mullen?
No.
All righty, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Judge.
Thanks, Judge. Next, we have Darrell Banks, Juvenile Justice Center.
Tiffany only had a couple requests. I had no requests. So, gotta throw it out. Let's see. So the funding for the juvenile court, as far as the counties are concerned, facilities is a 72-28 split, and it stays that way all the time, right? It hasn't ever changed. For operations, it's a 5-year rolling average of the kids in each county that are 12 to 17. Thank you. So typically that would change over the last few years. That's changed a few percentage points and kind of creeped up on Franklin County. So like I can remember when it was always like a 70-30 kind of split, right? So now this year it did not change from the previous year. So it's kind of unusual, but it worked out that way. So
And you did say it's a 78-22?
no, the 78 or the 72-28 is for
72-28.
facilities.
Okay,
And that doesn't fluctuate.
okay.
Operations is a 5-year rolling average of kids 12 to 17 in the counties. And so that's how Benton County and Franklin County's proportion
Right.
is split, right? So let me see. So last year it was 35.98, and this year it came out to be the same 35.98. So that didn't fluctuate. And then typically we'll have a little bit of increase in the budget due to contractual obligations like COLAs and step increases, that sort of thing. But we've had so much transition and turnover within the court. I have 5 open detention positions. Sheila Berry left is a good example. Our previous accountant, and I messed up from the very beginning because I wanted to introduce you to Crystal Garcia, who has replaced Sheila. Crystal's been with us for like 15 years and knows a lot of different aspects of the court, and so we're really excited to have her in as our financial manager. But so I'm sorry, Crystal, I messed that up, right? So anyway, those types of things would increase a little bit, but because of that turnover, and if we did hire people, they were coming in at a lower step. And so through that all, there's absolutely very little change in the budget from our request from the previous year. So we've been very thoughtful about if and when we need to fill open positions. And
Okay.
so, anyway.
Any questions?
No.
You know, the ongoing problems that we have is our building.
Yeah.
And I know there's conversations regarding, you know, how we're gonna, if and how we're gonna build a new one, how that's all gonna work out, that sort of thing. But keep in mind, I mean, if it started today, we're talking 3 years out. And so there's some pretty big ticket items that probably might break in between that time, like our cooling tower, water cooling tower. So that's 140 grand, and you don't just fix that the next week. That takes like 4 months to fix. So that's what I'm concerned about. Is that's great. There might be a building out here in a few years, but in the meantime, this stuff is on such borrowed time that if it breaks down, it's kind of like, do I fix that or not? You know, or can I not fix that? So there's those things. And then I also hear conversations about a salary survey or look at our salaries for the Bi-County folks. And, you know, for our legal process staff, our support staff, our detention staff, I feel like a AAA farm team, basically. I mean, we find good people, we train them up, and then they're gone for a better paying job. And so, yeah, but
We can relate to that.
yeah. So, anyway, I think Crystal, you covered it.
Darrell, I got a quick question if you don't mind.
Uh-huh.
Yesterday, we had Sheriff Raymond in here and talking about our jail incarceration rates going down, in part due to the new policing requirements, but also just a general decline in the number of incarcerated folks. Are you seeing the same thing
Oh,
at
yeah.
the juvenile level? And can you give us just an idea of trends in that area?
Yeah, the trend is going down. So one of the first indicators of activity at our court level that we look at is referrals from law enforcement. So not just to detention, but just to the court in general. And when I looked at that in July, from January to July, we were 40%, over 40+% over, or I mean, under what we did the previous year. And that was low. Okay, so, and then, so to give you an example, in 2019, our average daily population of kids in detention was 29.6 kids. Okay.
What is it today?
Well, for the same time period in 2020, in 2021, 21 today. So let me get this right. So January to October of 2021, our average daily population was 14.24. So
Almost half of what it was the year before.
yeah, and you know, to answer your question, we have 6 kids in detention today. Now, the 6 kids we have in there are, one's a really significant mental health kid on an assault. We have an assault 1, robbery 1, burglary 1, possession of a firearm, robbery 1, firearm, burglary 1, firearm, reckless burning. So the kids that we do have need to be there.
Of the 6 or so that you have in there, can you tell me how many of those are Franklin County versus Benton County?
You know, you would think out of 6 kids, I could probably figure that out, but not off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple, I know for sure. Yeah. And as far as a trend, the trends are breaking all over. I mean, I've never seen it like this. And it's, a trend around the state. It's not just a local trend. So, and that's has to do with, some of the policing law Sheriff Raymond talked about, has to do with one of our Supreme Court rule that came out, 7.16, that limits our ability to issue warrants. And then COVID shut the schools down for a long time. We're starting to see an uptick in referrals kind of in October, but it's all school related, fighting, that kind of thing. Some of the substance abuse laws. So, as you can imagine, our kid volume has gone down. So, and we have a couple, at least one open probation position that I didn't fill. That lady went to one of the schools. But so what we've done is we're cross-training people more and more. And so one of the things that has not gone down is child abuse and neglect. Okay, so when CPS picks up a kid or children takes them from their family, then they have to have a shelter care hearing within 72 hours. And then they may be placed with relatives, they may go into foster care, that sort of thing. And so that has increased, that is, exponentially kind of increased on us. And so one of the programs that impacts at our court level is our guardian ad litem program. So we have 4 staff right now that are in that program specifically, but then I've cross-trained several of our juvenile probation counselors with lower caseloads to help with that, because they're just getting, jammed with that. And those cases typically last for a couple of years to go through that system. So that's the activity in the court.
Thank you.
Good question.
So with those decreased numbers, the new building that you're proposing, are you,
I have no idea how.
I was just wondering size-wise.
Well, here's the one wild card that we don't know about is last year was legislation to increase the age of juvenile court jurisdiction to include 18 and 19-year-olds, so up to age 20.
So it could increase your numbers then.
Yeah, and which adds a tremendous number of challenges, especially when we're looking at a detention center. Is how do you keep a 13-year-old and a 19-year-old?
And the other thing is we all know the numbers are decreasing because of the laws that are being put down on the books, which are letting them go.
Well, there will be a swing. It's how long until that swing.
Yeah.
And I've seen it 2 or 3 times in my career where it's done this. But I've never seen it this low. It's pretty amazing. But that's not because there's not problems out there. It's because of not being held accountable for it. So yeah, I've struggled with that. And, what you do today based on what you're seeing today may not be what you get tomorrow, but you don't want to go too big.
Right.
So you got to be, I don't know that I got a good answer for that.
And currently you're building right now, what's the max capacity?
Well, we could typically, with the current staffing, we could hold 50 kids in our detention center, but we've not come anywhere close to that in quite a few years, and we don't want to. We would put programs in to try to keep kids out, that don't need to be there necessarily. So yeah, but this is a wait and watch kind of situation for a little while.
Well, even if you got the okay, materials are so hard to come by right now. People are having a hard time finishing houses.
Yeah, even if everyone said, yeah, that's great, let's go right now, there's so much planning. By the time you break dirt, you're a year out. And by then, so who knows?
All right.
But if things break in between that time, don't say, I didn't say something.
All right. Is there any other questions?
No.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, take care.
Well, Keith, that concludes today.
You were efficient today. You moved right through.
So as of tomorrow on Thursday, we're sort of ahead of schedule on everything. Do you think we could run that Friday review miscellaneous funds or postponements if necessary into Thursday?
I'm sure we can.
I think that would be,
That usually doesn't take very long.
no. And I think maybe we should include that on Thursday so that we can include this.
Check the auditor's office.
Yeah, most of the time, we don't need it, so it's just there just in case, so
Okay.
should be able to.
And we could probably do that on Thursday if we did need it.
Sure.
We should have plenty of time.
Mhm.
All right, with that, then I guess we're done for the day and the meeting is adjourned.